Interesting. That song had me wondering, am I Tara belonging to the one, or does the one belong to me? And I think I can go both directions, which is not exactly relevant to the talk, but that caught me up in the question. So I'm going to share a couple of stories about myself in the course of this talk. And I do that because sometimes I think our teaching gets a little bit too out there in the ether, in the allness of all, and not in our day-to-day lives. And what I'm actually going to be talking about today is how we stay present and aware in the midst of turmoil and unexpected events and all that's going on in the world. That going into denial, oh, that's not happening, or God is good, therefore whatever happens to me is cool, or arguing and saying, I've been a good person. How come this is happening to me? None of those ways serves us in the long run. Instead, it catches us up in arguing with what's real. In the little r sense, what's real, and drops us into suffering. So I'm going to begin with this talk and my experience of it. I talked with Reverend Eileen right after she had lost Mark, and she asked me to come up here and speak for 3 Sundays. And I love to speak with people. And I happen to know the topic was becoming. That's the theme for April. And so I said, absolutely, I will do it. Then for the next week and a half, I procrastinated like crazy. I barely even looked at the denomination's outline of what's, maybe raise it up. I can also project because I'm told that the Zoom people get a different microphone. Okay, how many of you in the back can hear me now better?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to stand right in front of this, and if for some reason you can't hear me, wave.
It will work even better.
Yes, like an ice cream cone. Yes. It's what we teach our practitioners in Santa Rosa. Think of it as an ice cream cone. Get it right up at your mouth. But don't lick it, please. So here I was knowing I had 3 talks, one of them this Sunday, and not moving forward with it at all. So one of the things that I do that to me feels very down to earth and practical is when I'm doing my morning practice, sometimes I simply ask myself and my buddy, the one, what the heck's going on? So I said, why am I putting off doing something that I love? What's going on? And when I ask a question like that, I then let it go. I don't try and figure it out up here. I just listen. And what bubbled up was, here's vulnerability, which is next week's talk. I was afraid of what you all might think of my talk. What if you didn't like it? Oh my goodness, that would be horrible. And in fact, though I might influence the outcome a little bit, if I actually was clear in my words and attempted to make points, it might impact the quality of your reception, but I could not guarantee that you all would just go, oh, yay, Reverend Tara. And struggling with that, judging myself for that, going, oh my God, I'm terrified that they won't like this, is not mine to control, is not mine to do. It's beyond my control, and all the energy and the effort I put into that doesn't help me or anyone else. So after discovering I was afraid, for a while I went out and weeded my garden because that's what all experienced ministers do. They just go, ah, I don't want to hear about it. And then I came back and recognizing that I had some things to say from where I am now, ideas started to flow. Starting with a little idea. What's one thing I want that community to take from this talk? Once I identified that, it gave me a way to move through the fear, not ignoring it, but moving through it and doing what I wanted to do in presenting this talk. So that's a very important element of what shows up actually as being present. I asked, procrastination is trying to tell me something. Why am I procrastinating around something I want to do, I love to do? And then listening and hearing the fear and not saying, oh, come on, Tar, you've been a minister for years, get over it. But instead, okay, I'm afraid and I can't do anything about that. So let's find something I can do something about, the content of the talk. That process is one I'm going to come back to again and again throughout this talk. How do I acknowledge what's happening, be it good or challenging, rather than denying it, making everything good, or wallowing in the event as what defines who I am? Each of those ways takes me out of myself, away from presence. There's a marvelous quote from Emerson where he rants about what it is to escape from the present moment and the impact of it. And he compares how human beings often handle presence and how Rose does it. So I'm going to read this section from his essay, Self-Reliance. It begins with the roses. These roses under my window make no reference to former roses or better ones. They are what they are. They exist with God today. There is no time for them. There is simply the rose. But man, or humankind, postpones or remembers. He does not live in the present, but with reverted eyes laments the past, or heedless of the riches that surround him, stands on tiptoe to foresee the future. He or we cannot be happy until we too live with nature, with our essential self in the present, outside of time. I invite you to take a moment to notice when you're distracted, where do you go? Do you go to something that's happened in the past and what it should have been or could have been or wasn't? Or do you go to the future, to that time and place where finally you'll have fill in the blank so you can be happy? Take a moment and consider, are you more in the past when you're not present or in the future? In each of those places, it happens that my bias is to run to the future. You're not being who you are. You're not present. You're escaping into something you're judging that was or could have been better or that will be awesome someday. Not recognizing this amazing being that's here right now. Years ago, I was in a workshop, I can't remember the title now, but it was led by Dick Olney. And he was talking about our sense of presence, of spirit, of that some transcendentness. that each of us has as an experience. And rather than say God or spirit or whatever other name, he gestured a sense of looking with awe and wonder and quiet, not trying to define or say, oh, that's a beautiful deer over there. Isn't it sweet? Or, oh my goodness, the sunset, but simply being in the presence of that moment. That's an invitation today. It's not simply those moments that renew us, that restore us, in which we come alive, though they're incredibly important. It's all of it, absolutely all of it. The job issues, the relationship challenges, the health diagnoses, all of that is a part of this incredible human form as expressed as spirit. Not just the bits we pick and choose, but opening to every single bit of it. We don't celebrate Easter because of the parade into Jerusalem. We don't just celebrate it because the tomb was empty. We celebrate it because all of the ways that Jesus showed up, that consciousness, that presence, that being who he was, in this teaching as an example of how one can love and be present. That's the allness, not picking and choosing what we want to experience and rejecting all the rest of it. So that's a piece of this talk. How do we stay present when everything feels chaotic, unexpected, not what we wanted or planned? There's a lot of that right now, as a couple of folks have mentioned. And in our, well, I want to say this, as religious scientists, as people of the science of mind, we sometimes go to a place that I find, even though I'm an ordained minister, I reject a bit. We say, just change your thoughts and your world will change, as if we can make physical changes in what's happening. Sometimes that happens. There are miraculous occurrences, and I'm not telling you to reject that possibility, but the invitation is another part of presence, that you accept what's happening and notice what it is inviting you to understand. Here's the second example from my own life, and then we'll go to something deeper. Years back when I lived up in Reading, I was the designated person who had to call AT&T when our internet was messed up. That was not my favorite task. The first couple of times I called after we moved up there, I tried my best to explain what was going on, and I did the various checklist steps with the customer service rep, from turning the computer off and on, and then making sure it was plugged in and all of that. The third time I needed to call, within several months, not over years, I realized if I did the checking the plug and turning on off and all the rest of that stuff ahead of time, I might jump ahead to AT&T recognizing there was actually a problem. So on my third or fourth call, they said, thank you for calling. How may we help you? And I said, my internet's choppy or whatever I said. And they said, we appreciate your concern. Have you turned the computer off and then on again? And I said, yes. And I actually also unplugged it, counted to 10 and plugged it back in, and all the other things that I had gone through before. I shared that. And the customer service rep said, thank you for letting me know. Now, since you've already turned it off and on, have you unplugged it? I managed to keep from hanging up the phone in frustration and anger for about 20 seconds. And then I just went, this is not getting anyone anywhere, and I am furious. So years later, I wondered why it was that I reacted to a simple customer service call as if someone had just kidnapped my firstborn child. The scale of the reaction was way off. When something like that happens, I've learned to notice and to wonder, why is it that a simple customer service call has me so upset? And what often happens, and what I invite you to consider doing, is to find out what's the belief or the unmet need underneath the reaction. For me, it turns out the trigger was that I often am upset when people don't know that I know what I'm doing or act as if they don't. And I get very much more upset when they aren't hearing what I'm telling them. That wasn't on the customer service rep. That was on my experiences in my younger days and a very tender spot. Once recognizing that, I could say, oh, it's just a customer service rep. They're probably drilled to follow the steps, that they have to stay on that script because they have to make sure that they haven't messed anything and that they're not investing IT expertise in a problem which is simply that it's not plugged in right. And so I settled down, and since then have been way more compassionate because I know what the trigger is and can choose not to run after it. Another way in the everyday life of all of us to be present. And I'll bet each of you has an experience like that in some place in your life. And I invite you to take a breath and just consider what might lie under that experience. In fact, let's pause right now and just take 2 or 3 deep breaths in and out. In and out. And once more, in and out. How many of you in your work with meditation teachers have been invited to simply notice your breath when they're talking about how to meditate? That's one of those things that we do that requires that we be present. Counting the breath, noticing the breath, all of that other chatter has to fall away, especially, this is a Zen practice I sometimes manage to get to 3 or 4 on, counting the breaths without letting my mind wander until I get to 10, and then coming back to 1, and again, counting my breaths without the distraction of thought. If you want to, try it. Or do something else that brings you present, like taking a bit of time outside in nature, hearing the ambient sounds, feeling the breath, the wind or the breeze on your cheek, or simply sitting outside or inside with nothing to do for just a moment. I have a friend who sets a timer on her phone. And when that timer rings every hour or two, she stops and notices what she appreciates in the moment. It only takes her a minute or two. And then she goes back to whatever she was doing. but it's brought her more present into what's good in her life in that moment. So I'm now skipping ahead in my words to something from the author of the Book of the Month, Mark Nepo. One of the rewards for saying yes to reality is deep presence, which opens the vibrancy, the aliveness that exists between all things. For presence is how the soul breathes. And for all the places I've traveled, all the people I've studied, all the books I've read and written, I'm humbled to say that whatever I've learned has come alive through deep presence, which is only accessed through personal authenticity. Such presence resides in the invisible charged space in between. You and another, you and the world, you and the mysterious oneness of things. That. The second element of this talk is awareness. Being aware of what's happening, not just in your story and your feelings and your reactions, as was exemplified by the AT&T story, but settling and listening, even in the most intense moments. Some of you may have heard the phrase, pain is unavoidable. Suffering is optional. It's based on a story that the Buddha shared with his disciples around 2 arrows, and I'm going to share kind of a summary of it. And then the last bit is what the Buddha said in closing. So here's the essence of the story. Someone is walking in the woods. She is shot in the arm by an arrow and it hurts. Another arrow arrives. Buddha asks his students, does the second arrow hurt? Of course, they respond. Buddha shakes his head. The first arrow is the arrow of pain, the reality of a foreign object piercing the skin. The second arrow is not physical. It's the story that we create around the event of being shot by an arrow. That story, with elements like, oh my gosh, I could have been killed. What idiot doesn't pay attention to where their arrow is going? Am I trespassing? Was that why I was shot? And more. All the stories that may have nothing to do with the event. That is the source of suffering. And here's Buddha's conclusion. The wise feel the first arrow, but not the second. They feel sadness, but they don't drown in despair. They feel grief, but they do not lose themselves in it. They allow pain to be what it is without turning it into a prison. As I did with the AT&T reaction, notice what you're feeling. Notice the stories you're telling yourself and choose to explore all of that to discover what lies underneath. That may be an unconscious bit of story that doesn't serve you at all. Many spiritual philosophies sometimes allude to what's called the witness consciousness. That's that awareness. I'm looking at my hand. Who is it that's looking? It's possibly not the ego and it's not the allness. There's something observing what's happening. And that observer, that witness consciousness doesn't judge, doesn't assume, doesn't tell stories, simply reports what's happening with the invitation that we explore it. I've been working with a Stoic recently, a modern fellow who lives in the UK, and he has developed a strategy for those moments when we're overwhelmed with something. I'm going to invite you to imagine yourself as the hero or heroine, the focus of this story. Are all of you willing to do that? Even though it may have nothing to do with anything in your life. All right. So he describes 5 steps to take to come to terms with something very difficult and disturbing. The first is to notice. The second is to aim. To sort. The third is to aim. Next comes action, and then acceptance. So notice, sort, aim, act, accept. I'll tell you what those mean in the context of this imaginary story I'm sharing, in which you're the key character. So you've been off all afternoon running errands, finally getting done some of those things you keep having on your list every day, and you're kind of pleased with yourself. I got most of those done, thank goodness. When you get home, there's a note on the door from one of your neighbors. Upset because you weren't home when they came by to pick you up to go to an event. They complained that the two of you had been planning for it for several days. How could you not show up? After your initial surprise, you realize you had forgotten about your plans. Within seconds of your reading the note comes the first story. How could I forget? What's going on? Another quickly follows. They're so touchy about everything. I'm going to have to walk on the other side of the street for a while. And so on. Off goes your storyteller. Take a breath. Let's not get caught up ourselves in this imaginary story, even if it lands somewhere close to home. Here's John Brooks' 5 steps to move through an event without denying it, making nice, or wallowing. The first thing is to notice what's happening. The neighbor's note has created a reaction in you when you read it on your return. Stop for a bit since you're aware that you're reacting. Notice, what is it that's causing this reaction? Are you guilty over something? Are you mad about something? Are you afraid that what the note says is true and it just confirms all the things you're frustrated with yourself about? And on and on and on. So start by noticing. What's your reaction? What's your feeling around this note on your door? The next step is the one that's at the heart of this stoicism. It's to sort what is yours, where you have control, and what is not yours, where you do not have control. The example from AT&T, I can control my angry reaction. I cannot assure that that customer rep skips the script. That's likely not going to happen. So to fret around what I can't change or control is a waste of energy. So what's mine to do? What's not mine to do? What's yours to do? What's not yours? The next piece is something that I happened to see a list of qualities up on the wall when I was going to check something. The next step is, in considering the event, how do you want to respond? In what feeling tone? What quality? For example, love, acceptance, welcoming, serenity, fun, peace, sacredness, inspiration. In this moment, aim your response toward a quality that matters towards you. And it may be a different quality in each event, but claim it for yourself. Before you do anything more, you've sorted what's yours and what's not, and you've realized, I really want to be in clarity, for example. From that direction, you choose a small, doable action related to the event. For example, you make a note to make sure that your calendar has reminders that tell you what's coming and what to do. Or you write a small, authentic apology to your neighbor for what happened, not blaming either yourself or the neighbor. Or something else, something that brings a sense of, I'm doing something about this, but I'm not simply beating myself up or considering the neighbor an idiot. I'm doing something else out of the quality I want to embody. And then finally, having done the noticing, the sorting, the aiming, and the action, now you accept that what happened, happened. You can't change the past. You weren't at home when your neighbor expected you to be there. Maybe they forgot and screwed up. Who knows? But what happened is what happened, and settling into accepting it, not fighting with it, and seeing who you are as you move through whatever that event was, however trivial or catastrophic or political or whatever else. How can you be yourself, present and aware, without being completely knocked off center? I wish I could say that there will not be any more times of uncentering events. That's not been my experience for the last 76 years. Maybe in the 77th it will be. But my sense is there will always be something. And the gift of this life, of its spirituality and its humanness, is that conjunction of both parts and the amazing possibilities that arise from it. That's the gift. So I'm going to close with something that is not a 5-step treatment. And yet, as I concluded this talk, finished writing it, I realized that this mantra that came to me 15, 20 years ago is a blessing and a reminder. It has 4 pieces to it. And I'm going to say them with a quality of prayer and with a slowness that allows you to settle into each word. So if you choose to, close your eyes and drop within the stillness, the mystery, the allness of life. And be with each of these words as a blessing. Love. Trust. Let go. Be. Once more. Love. Trust. Let go. Be. And so it is.